Much, Nick. Now, we're going to be continuing this conversation with Darnell Moore, senior editor at Mic.com, and Steve Rogers, a retired detective and former FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force member. Darnell and Steve, thank you so much for joining us. Before we get started, I want to throw to some more perspective from this incident.
I think the only reason is because they were black. That's my only recourse.
This hasn't had to do nothing with race.
What does it have to do with then?
This has to deal with just a group of teens getting together, having a good time.
Now, obviously, not everyone is in agreement with regards to what is happening, and you heard there from the father and the cousin of the young lady who was in the video that struck so many people. Steve, I want to go right to you first. Does it appear that this incident is race-related, especially when we go back to that sound from Brandon Brooks, who is a young white teenager who was a part of this group that shot the video? He's saying, I was skipped over when we were being addressed by this officer.
But there was also a white girl arrested. She was handcuffed. Look, this has nothing to do with race. Now, I want to start off by saying, look, I do question the drawing of the weapon, but let's get into the mind of a police officer who arrives on a scene like that. It's a volatile situation. You don't know who's there. You know there's a lot of kids there. It's getting out of control. But you know what's going through that officer's mind? Are there people there armed? Are there people there that shouldn't be there? And we're not just talking about kids. Cops don't know what they're walking into. So their idea is, let's quell the disturbance. They get into a survival mode. And I'm not making any excuses for some of the things he did. But my goodness, let's talk about some responsibility and accountability on the part of these teens.
Darnell, what about you? You think this was race-related?
So what's interesting is, let's sort of state some facts. Here is an officer who showed up to the scene already hyper-aggressive, grabbing teens, throwing them on the ground, hurling profanity at the young people. And we cannot, forget the fact that he actually threw a young girl on the ground who was half dressed. And here's an adult male whose body is lunged onto that of a young, barely dressed girl who, after having pulled out a gun on young people. Now, if the statement is that these are all right actions, this is actually why, or a basis of a rationale for why it is that black people are twice as likely to be shot while unarmed than whites. And this is a type of rationale that adds fervor to an idea like that.
I want to bring up the slow motion video that we have of the incident, of the girl and the confrontation between the girl and the police officer. Do we have that, guys, in the control room? Do we have that video? Here it is. That's slow motion right now. Now, Steve, you were talking about the fact that maybe this officer was under distress. You don't know if people have weapons there, if people shouldn't be there, or who should be there, who should not be there. Can you at least address, Steve, the fact that does this seem like appropriate behavior for an officer to be slamming a 14-year-old girl down to the ground the way in which he did, who obviously is unarmed because she has a bikini on, and then subsequently take out a gun?
Well, first of all, I'll agree with you on this point. She was sitting down. She was upset. I do question why he picked her up and did what he did, okay? As far as him drawing the gun, I do question that, but right before he drew that gun, you had, I think, a couple of other juveniles approaching him in an aggressive manner. Now, we're going to have to, the investigators are going to have to get into his mind, and if he can articulate that he thought his life was threatened, maybe that's why he did it. The problem is we don't know. We don't know, and we shouldn't be passing judgment on anyone until we get the facts. As far as the young lady's concerned, listen, I agree. I question if she's sitting down and not doing anything, I question why he picked her up and did what he did.
All right, Darnell, I want to go back to you. You have stated that you feel like people should be intervening in situations like this, and that's actually a good thing. Obviously, Steve, we know your sense is that that may be inflammatory to the situation. When Yasmin and I were talking about this, Darnell, we felt as though intervention is something that could make you suddenly the subject of an officer who, as you mentioned, seems out of control and hyper-aggressive.
Well, let me read something that Darnell said quickly before you respond, Darnell. You said this in an article. You said people who passively witness police abuse are complicit participants in the violence if they do nothing. But like Ali said, I mean, what if you intervene and then you're the one who is the subject?
Yeah, in the case like this, where an officer is already hyper-aggressive, it is clear that there will be fear and trepidation on the part of some to even intervene. Intervention does not necessarily have to look physical. It could mean recording like the young person did who was out there. Now, granted, I think he was able to record and not be, apprehended by the police precisely because of what he said. He happens to be white, right? Now, it means, though, that others there could have done things like record, ask some of the young victims if they needed assistance, to try to track, to get contact information for them, to reach out to parents. The silence signals a type of violent complicity. Another thing I want to note, though, if the characters in this scene had been different, if that was, let's say, a 14 or 15-year-old white female who was dressed in a bathing suit, who was thrown to the ground, and a police lunged on her back with another adult male who we do not know as of yet, who was standing above her body, I do think that there would be a lot more outrage. In my mind, though, it seems that the public is perceiving this as an issue that's okay, because these are black youth, and black youth are not allowed or even seen as children. They're seen as hyper-aggressive. Yeah. That's a problem.
Darnell, a lot of this is...
Go ahead, Steve, really quickly. You got to wrap it up.
Okay, a lot of this is not okay on a lot of levels. But, you know, we have to get the facts, and hopefully this will drive communities like this to go into community policing, Darnell, which will bring people together, not divide them.
No question that we all agree on that. Steve, Darnell, thank you so much both for your time. This is clearly a conversation that's going to be ongoing.